Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're able to join us tonight. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And we're going to have some presentations, and we're going to be looking back on some of the content I created over the last couple of years in preparation for the trial, and specifically for this part of the trial, as far as the experts coming in and talking about the crime scene, in this case, the outdoor crime scene. And so we'll be looking at some content I've had out and put out previously. And of course, we'll be discussing some of the testimony. Originally, I had planned for this to be the follow-up for part one that we did Saturday night, as far as the cuttings of the injuries and the use of box cutters. But with the introduction of the CSI coming back and being brought back to the stand and testifying, wanted to go ahead and let that be part of the introduction into what we will try to do Thursday night, and for the fact that some of the crime scene information, as far as the movement, the injuries, are all part of this, and they all tie in together. But with that being said, before we get too far into this, if you have any information regarding this case, absolutely make sure that law enforcement, prosecutor, defense has all that information, for the fact that we have to have information to the proper authorities so that justice can be found for Abby and Libby, and to make sure that everything is going on and being presented in both the prosecution and the defense of Richard Allen. So just want to make that clear. If you have any of that information, absolutely make sure it's passed on to the proper authorities. But let me see here. All right. Of course, we're going to be talking about this major who is, or now I think he may even be up higher up in the chain of command. But anyway, during his career, this man had a absolutely brilliant career in crime scene processing, education, training programs, both taking and presenting those. This, of course, is Patrick Cicero, who was brought in by the prosecution as an expert to look at it, evaluate it, see what it says, and to bring some clarity of the processes and his evaluation of the crime scene, and specifically about some movements and what happened in that crime scene. And some of his testimony absolutely has been helpful to the prosecution, and some of his testimony will be helpful to the defense. And as far as, and that's way, whatever's at that crime scene, and if you look at it with an open mind, honest opinion, viewing it and have an understanding of what those blood patterns mean and tell you about the stories of what went on at that crime scene, that is the truth. There's nothing as far as what can happen through the blood spatters, that if they're read accurately and with experience, that others can come and look at it and they will come up with a similar understanding and story that is told by those blood patterns, blood spatter, and through those analysis. And you'll see that while I was unaware of specifics about this case, because all we had was probable cause affidavits and things, but in anticipation of understanding of processing the scenes that I have in my career and the training I had, that you're going to see that some of these things will be true, that regardless if I did the test 2 years ago, regarding what at that time we didn't know would be the testimony, that we see that continue through. And that's very important for us all to be aware of, that blood patterns and things that occur at these crime scenes, they're not unique. What happens at one crime scene is typically going to happen at other crime scenes, especially if it's with certain types of weapons, and it's repeatable. And that's the science of blood spatter. If it wasn't repeatable and able to be read by more than just one individual, then of course you don't have a science. But this, of course, shows that we do have understandings, and it's repeatable regardless of who's conducting the test or analyzing any specific crime scene. And then we have we see that there were some findings that Cesariel, I'm probably butchering his name, but from his previous time on the stand and some of the pretrial stuff, he had certain findings that he found, and we'll look at these from the blood pools, the leaf litter with blood stains, the upside down L, as he references what is at one point was reported as the F tree, the shape transfers, the different blood patterns that were noted, transfers and droplets. He noted mobility by Libby, and that Libby was dragged to her final position, and noted that Libby at one point was in a sitting position. And all those are part of the analysis, that if we have certain types of blood droplets or stains or transfers on certain areas of the victim, they can only get there in a couple of different ways. And when you look at them, you'll have to assess and see what is the most likely way. And of course, he says that she was sitting at some point. And in particular note, he testifies that he found it extremely odd, and I find it extremely odd also, about the lack of blood that's on Abby's hands, and some of the other upper clothing that was saturated with blood. And of course, he thinks the limbs are used to conceal. I not so much, but you know, everyone has an opinion about those limbs. I have no idea why they're there, other than they play some role of what the offender at that point in time thought that he had to bring to it, because it took extra effort for him to do those limbs. And we have a video that I made a couple of years ago with Mrs. Steve about dragging through the woods for several tests to see how easy it would be to move a person, and how much disturbance could be noted on a leafy debris area of where there's a lot of small limbs, leaves, and that. How distinctive would that drag trail be? And of course, even through his testimony, you'll see that there were certain things about it. But anyway, I watched some other creators and some people that's been there firsthand listening to the testimony. And there was 3 locations that were noted specifically about certain things that occurred. And Cesariel explained about where the F tree is, or the upside down L, that the attack appears, or at least the start of the blood trails and some of the transfers appears to be as what I've identified as location 1. And then there was a blood trail going towards location 2, where this testimony is, and there's this pool of blood of where more than likely this is the location of where Libby succumbed to her injuries. And from that location 2, being drug up to the final location, which was near where Abby parallels to the side of her, And Abby had not been moved, and that sticks were placed at that location. And like I said, this is just something I pieced together from listening to the others' analysis of the testimony of them, of their firsthand, and some of their drawings. And of course, I'm not a expert at drawing either, and so therefore I went to some of this and created this in a certain manner so that we have an understanding of it. And of course, I'm sure that some of this may be, it's not to scale, absolutely, but we have these 3 locations that were located about how certain positions occurred and certain things that were noted by the CSI expert. Let's see here. Trying to get everything going here, guys. All right. Before we get too far, let me get into chat, see what's going on here, guys. Appreciate all of y'all being here. And give it thumbs up, reach out, share. And we appreciate that. Marion and James Tate, good to see y'all. Gil Hurd. Hello, Paula. If you have any questions as we go through this, because I've got the video to go through, and I got a couple of separate slideshows of some of the things that I created over the last couple of years that we're going to be looking at as far as some of the things that were noted by the CSI guy. Let's see here. There's Paula Sensei, Miranda Lee, good to see you. Bama Sin, good to see you as always. Barbara Hall, excellent to see you. There's Jill Moser. And yeah, and like I said, we're going to be here for a little bit. Bama Sin, hello, Stacy, good to see you. Kamal Anaris, always great to see you. BGOG, Josh Taposh, making dinner. Okay. Oh, thank you, Anna, about leaving your DNA on the thumbs up. I love it that someone said it might be your alibi. Oh, man. Sharon Edwards. Melissa Wildcard. Just want to make sure we don't have any questions. I get too far behind because that does happen. Little one, hello. Junior Johnson. Don't know if he's from Michigan or Kentucky tonight. I think those are the 2 places he comes from. Barbara says justice for Abby and Libby. Absolutely. Thank you. Is Mrs. Steve in her bunny suit? Yes, she is. I have the long version. I have also put out the short version. I don't know if I sent out the long version or not, but you'll see the 7-minute version tonight. Mrs. Anna says, Mrs. Steve is probably glad when Mr. Steve is away on long trips. She isn't being dragged through the woods covered with leaves and sticks. Absolutely. Hey, date night. Georgia style. That's Georgia guys. But Mrs. Steve and I, we discuss a lot of different things as far as looking at this CSI stuff. She has a great understanding of it. She was exposed to it for many years. She would come to the crime scenes, assisting as far as making sure everybody was fed, bringing food for as we process these crime scenes over my career. Because when you work in these crime scenes, you only get one shot at those first critical hours, be it 12 hours, 24 hours, 72 hours. Doesn't matter. You get one chance at this, guys. And you have to put every bit of your consciousness into it and understand the training, apply that training, take that chaos of a crime scene, bring order to it, document it, and present it to that jury in a manner that gives confidence that everything that you can do at that crime scene was done at that crime scene. Now, is that some of the things that have been brought to the forefront as far as what occurred on this case? There's certain things and aspects of it that I don't approve of, or I don't truly understand why certain steps were taken, or certain things weren't or haven't occurred, and that causes me concern. If it causes me concern, does it cause the jury concerns? And we have to really be careful about that. Badass American says that Richard Allen saying he tossed the box cutter in CVS dumpster is huge. It will be if it's at a very critical point of when he shouldn't have known that. Yes, and some of this testing I'm going to do next week as far as the depth being 1 inch for the fact that on these box cutters, when that blade is fully extended out there, it's just over 1 inch. And that's some of the testing I'll do later this week on some of the stuff that will be coming up. Now, the test area of where I did some of the blood pattern testing is on a very similar type of wooded area. And you'll see the similarities. You can see even here that my testing was in Georgia. Of course, the crime scene is in Indiana, but the ground and the leaf patterns were very similar. And I tried to replicate it as good as I can with the, what I could. While I have a lot of mannequins and things, the weight for these mannequins does not fully show what dead weight brings to the crime scene. And of course, Mrs. Steve isn't dead weight. She is a live, breathing human being, but there's still certain traits of when you drag them across the ground that they're not able to lift their legs and let me fully carry their weight by as I did the drag from the armpits. And we did another drag. I drug her by her ankles one time. I didn't drag her by one arm for the fact I didn't want to dislocate Mrs. Steve's arm. And how hard would it be to drag somebody by one arm? You'd have to have some considerable strength to drag a person by one arm, but it could be done. And I do not know of Richard Allen's full capabilities. I found out today that he had a heart attack when he was 37. That's not a good thing for anyone. Let's see. Walter, good to see you. Steve, some branches seem to be so big. Do you think one person could handle those big branches? You'll see in this test of that I tried to consider, and this was way back then where we had rumors about the sticks. We didn't have, it was first coming out that the sticks were in a certain order, and we hadn't, some of the leaked images weren't out there at that time. And so that's part of my time trials that you'll see in here, and have an understanding of what some of that's going on. And then, of course, we have the F tree images or the upside down L, how that could be done. And the expert and I, we have a similar thought process. He thinks it was with Libby's hand. I do too. But when I was doing the F tree analysis, I was doing it from the standpoint that at that time, I believe that there was some type of defensive injuries, and there was a constant blood flow possibly from Libby's hands. We find out that's not true. We don't have those defensive injuries, which changes the narrative quite a bit in my eyes as far as are we possibly thinking there could be more than one offender? Absolutely. We have to try to figure out, because humans do not, or no animal goes quietly into any type of attack. Easily they fight. And with the human mindset and the survival instincts, whereas we can think about what's happening to us, we can see the threats, we understand the threats, we'll reach for those threats, we'll defend ourselves against those threats. If someone has us around the throat, you'll grab for those arms, you'll grab for that weapon. If it's in front of you being thrust at you, you'll try to fend it off. You'll get those defensive injuries. If you feel a pain on your any part of your body, you'll reach for that area. And you'll have everything from transfers and to or defensive injuries are noted as cuts to your fingers, inside your palms, to your forearms, elbows, shoulders, even your head. I mean, there's so many weapons as far as parts of the human body that can be thrust into the fight that can cause those defensive injuries, and we don't see that here. And that's a great mystery to me. But in daylight, and I had to use different trees. I had to use trees that are native to Georgia, not like what's native to Indiana. So the bark patterns will be different, but you'll be able to see that certain things as far as passive flows and what the F tree looks like, or when I was recreating it and trying to figure out what type of hand transfers. And this is something that has to be noted, that if this is a transfer from a hand that did not have a defensive injury, that hand had to be absolutely saturated. If this is a transfer from Libby's hand to that tree, that hand had to be absolutely saturated with her blood, and then transferred from that injury very quickly before, and with very little force as far as there may have been some cast off, but that hand had to make contact with that tree while it was still heavily drenched and freshly came in contact with that injury to allow this much of transfer to occur, for the fact that if it was any time at all, blood is a fluid. It does not hang around. It goes, it pools, passive flows. If you move your hand at all, it'll cast off. If you have your hand down by your side, it'll run off. And then you wouldn't have that excessive blood transfers that you would expect with just contact, and how long and how large it was. So there's a lot of things that we really don't know. And this is one of the things as far as Mrs. Steve. This is the back of Mrs. Steve's Tyvek suit. We refer to it as her bunny suit, bunny attire. She has plenty of these. I don't, this is what I buy her as far as her wardrobe. I buy her Tyvek. She buys everything else, but I get her Tyvek, and for our testing and things. And if you look at this, you can see that there's some discolorations and some drag marks. And I believe our CSI expert mentioned about that there were some drag marks on the back of her that showed there was a drag. The dragging did occur, and there were certain types of transfers. And then, of course, we have the from the DNA testimony and things about mixtures and things, and then we have the bloody sticks and possible areas that were touched of those sticks. When you look at this, you'll see that those sticks, while they aren't easily identifiable in the daylight or with natural lighting, that you don't see those stains readily jump out at you. But when you hit them with any type of chemical agent or that will react with it, such as luminol, they pop out at you under certain in dark conditions. And so even after washing the hands, that you still have those transfers. And this is something that I don't know what all they tested Abby's hands with during and looked at them to see if her hands had been washed, and why were her hands cleaned? Just don't know. And then, of course, we have the bullet testimony and some of the testing that we did about a bullet being stepped on. We have that in some of our other videos. And then, of course, Muddy Bloody. And how, if this individual walking down the road was easily identified as Muddy Bloody, why weren't the victims easily identified as Muddy Bloody? Why don't we see the same amount of that that was testified to by the witness having occurred? Strange, very strange. If we have one individual is clearly Muddy Bloody, while we do have the blood transfers, we don't have it to the extent of what this witness and some of the testing that we did looks like. All right. All right, let's watch the video first, and then we'll talk about some of the testimony and some of the video information as we look at this. Now, this, of course, is Mrs. Steve, and as we start the test, you'll note that I left her and we dragged. But as I drag her, pay close attention to the leaf debris in the ground. And as in everything that occurs, there's certain surprises that it's not a clear. And Cicero, as like I said, I'll probably butchering his name, that there wasn't a clear, defined drag path. And you see with this, because I think I drug Mrs. Steve about 25 feet there. And of course, you can look at the timestamps whenever you play this back, and you'll see that how long it takes to cover that area. I walk back and forth, and then if Mrs. Steve's laying there portraying being Libby, I go out and I get some of these branches that are laying around. I had used them earlier on mannequins. So while these branches were easily and had been stored over in a certain area, but even if you go back to my original where I just randomly went into the wood line to find these sticks, you'll see that in this type of environment, sticks are everywhere, and they're easily accessible, and you just pick them up and you take them. But I did all this testing to see how long it would take for certain things to occur, and it's not long. Just a few minutes here for the placing, locating the sticks, bringing them there, placing them in a certain order. I'm in no rush. And imagine if I was in a rush, how much faster this would be. What type of rush would a single offender or multiple offenders have been in? We just don't know. But like I said, I tried to cover as much about this. And at that time, I was working with limited information. We had pretty good understanding of what was supposed to be there. But was able to get most of it there. Mrs. Steve is laying there as the sticks are laid. Oop. All right. So anyway, there's supposed to be more to that. Okay, that's the short version. I've got another version I'll go get in a minute. So we'll stop that one. All right. And that's the short version, but we'll go into the other part of it. As you can see here, this, of course, is the Delphi crime scene. And this is the area I'm working at in Georgia. Now, before we get too far, let's go back into chat and see what's going on. Sensei has a question. I'm going to post it shortly. Yes. Cryptex has a great show. I go over there every now and then and mess around in his chat. Um, I hadn't seen that video. People need to look at the video of Alan holding a butcher knife to an injured bird and laughing as his wife and daughter said, "No, don't." That's interesting. Anna says, "True crime. What do you plan to do with Mrs. Steve, the mannequin's fake blood for Halloween? Would it be a trick or treat for little goblins to go to your house?" Um, Mrs. Steve, at some point, we will share. Mrs. Steve absolutely loves Halloween, and what she used to do to the little goblins, you'll change your opinion of what Mrs. Steve and her of what she would do to the youngsters on trick and treat. Oh, the tricks she would play. Since a true crime web, do you think that Abby possibly laid still and pretended to be deceased if she heard Libby being attacked, and that's why they say she didn't move? Um, while possible, and then she succumbed to blood loss. I don't know if that is possible or if she had been injured to a certain extent. Um, um, Anything's possible. I wasn't there, and but even when she sustained those injuries, we still don't have those hands, those defensive injuries. How could that be? And as we look at what Cesario noted was that it's possible that Abby and Libby, either or both, were either bound, they were unconscious, or they were restrained. And two of those, of course, require um, the applications of either some type of restraint, such as handcuffs, zip ties, tape, rope, um, whatever elements, or clothing, because you can bind people with clothing. It's been done in the past, as we saw with the at a certain point that with other serial offenders, such as the Zodiac, he had one victim tie the other. Could that have occurred here that Abby or Libby took a clothing item and possibly restrained the other one to the point that they couldn't react, and then the attack occurred on the other one before um, um, the other victim was able to um, um, get released? Did he check those bindings? Could it have been clothing that wouldn't have left that? Absolutely. We just don't know. And if that's a possibility or not. With it, with the lack of certain adhesives, markings, and things, um, it would um, lend towards clothing being used as restraints. This is just purely speculation on my part, but it has to be that. And the reason I'm talking about this, the other night I wasn't willing to talk about some of my thought process of how this could occur. But now that the expert has stepped forward and mentioned that uh, he's looking at being bound, unconscious, or being restrained, I'm more willing to discuss how a single offender could still do this, or even multiple offenders, by making either restraining them with clothing or something that wouldn't leave those um, rope burns or markings of them trying to break from their bindings. So there's a lot of things that could happen there. Elevate the process. Good to see you. Yeah, I've got to go out and let me get this other one, and I'll talk about it while we look at. Hmm, I have. I've got another video somewhere. That's the same video. I don't know where my 7-minute video is. Bummer. But anyway, you see Mrs. Steedman draw through there. And like I said, let me see right quick where it could be. All right. Let me go back into there. Let me pull that one up. All right. This is a longer version of it. Some of the control tests I was doing at the time was the victim move, the time it took, the strength of the offender, stick patterns, and we did this on a windy day. So this is a long version. So anyway, but some of this testing here, and as I do that, I'll go through as this video plays, and I will go through and answer some questions. But like I said, as this occurs, pay close attention to the lack of debris movement during those the drag tests. Stephanie, yes, thank you for covering this case, Steve. Absolutely. Mustang 65, justice for Abby and Libby. Hi, Walther says, I'm interested in seeing if box cutter is actually used in the confession. Absolutely. That is going to be, if it is there. And Anna, this absolutely is a key point. When did Richard Allen babble about a box cutter? If it was before the expert did, and then did the expert look at that and say, hey, that's a possibility, and then go back and look at some of this for the fact that may very well be the case of box cutters, because we saw some of the testimony from the pathologist or the whoever the medical examiner was about certain things. And we'll look at some of those transfer patterns that he mentioned as far as what type of, what could have caused certain elements as far as transfers on the victim or truth exposed. Poor Mrs. Steve. Mrs. Steve, she's quite the trooper. I wonder what the police would say if they walked up on Mrs. Steve, on Steve dragging Mrs. Steve by the ankles. Yes, in this video here, this is the long version. You'll see where I did drag Mrs. Steve by her ankles. Yes, the limb I just moved is over 7 feet long. It may not be as thick as what is in the crime scene image that I saw, but it is one of that length. And like I said, old wood, some of it is not that heavy. Mirror says, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this case lately. I believe RA is guilty, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence of it, though. We'll have to see that under the totality of the circumstances. I still believe, personal opinion, of course, he's innocent until proven guilty, but we don't know which way the jury is going to go. We still have that timeline of him being there at key points, locations, and not seeing people that, from my experiences at the trail, if he was in those locations, I do not see it being any type of possibilities that Abby and Libby could have gotten by him without him seeing them. If he's the guy on platform 1, now here you'll see me walking around memorializing this event, taking pictures of Mrs. Steve. I did this as part of the test so that you could see if someone was walking around either with a camera, video, or their cell phone, that some of these individuals will memorialize events, photograph it, and you see it doesn't take long. Is this something that he was doing? Is this part of his fantasy? I have no idea. But here's Mrs. Steve being drugged by her ankles. I'll throw some leaves on her there at that moment. And then I have to, after this, when Mrs. Steve gets up, I go back and I look at those drag trails of, she's pulling a stick out of her back. But I'm getting those Tyvek suits are extremely hot also. But anyway, pay attention that when I go back after this little section here, I go over the trail with the camera, and you'll see that the drag marks are very limited, that you can't really see. That means bare areas. So that tells us something. Steve, look at Rich Allen's writing and the letter F. Like I said, if it's Libby's hand transferred by what the expert said, but then again, who knows? We're not there, Stephanie. If a 200-pound deceased person is dragged by one arm, would that partially dislocate the shoulder noticeably in a post-mortem? That would happen to me, but my joints are loose. Very possible. I've been in violent encounters where I had my shoulder dislocated, but it wasn't, of course, in a being drugged. It was in an arm bar. But it doesn't take a lot to take that shoulder out of joint. Been there. Oh, Josh the Posh, gifted 5 True Crime Web memberships. Thank you. Appreciate that. Mustang. Justice for Timmy D's. Absolutely. Truth Exposed says, Anna, it depends. If it accidentally cranked the wrong direction, it will, but otherwise, no. I guess you have twisting or something, getting it in the right. Oh, Kamala Norris, gifted 5 True Crime Web memberships. Thank you. Appreciate that, guys. Means a lot to us. We wouldn't be able to do everything that we do. And for our members that gets these, our new members, we have membership or member-only shows on Sundays for everybody, and then on Wednesday for the upper tiers. And Mustang 65, Justice for LaFleur 4. Absolutely. Yes. Now, my shoulder has a habit of dislocating. Like I said, I never fully recovered after a very violent confrontation. Does CVS sell hazmat suits? No, but Home Depot, Lowe's does. Yes, those sleeves are Tyvek. That's a whole Tyvek suit that that Mrs. Steve was wearing. Let me see. But some of the transfers that you would expect, and this is some of what, when you look at the ground debris and you're looking at if we're getting there on the next day after blood spatter had occurred the previous day, you can see that some of the staining pattern, it doesn't just jump out at you. That as the blood dries out, it can take on almost a camouflaging effect. It's not really noticeable unless you really focus on it. And of course, through testing, you can find things, but you'll have partial fingerprints that. And do we have that noted? All these swabs that were taken from the shirt, and it was noted that the blood that they searched for certain areas of the clothing that may not be stained with blood so much, because blood will override any and all other types of DNA transfer, be it skin or hair or otherwise, and sweat or other fluids. But the blood is so reactive and so enriched with DNA that it will override. But they would have still taken certain swabs from some of those, for the fact that if we have those fingerprints or those handprints or those transfers, we have to test those. You have these transfers from partial prints to a knife tip. These are different parts of a knife. And then I did some way back, and I think it's noted by the pathologist about he was thinking that some of the transfers could have been by the handle of either a steak knife or a box cutter. And as you can see here, I have a knife handle with wood grain with that transfer. You have the end caps and then on the first test that I did the other day, as far as the box cutters, you see some imprints in the clay that I use, Play-Doh, of how those weapons can have very clear and defined lines that transfer from one medium to another. Try and get my chat going back again. Yes, Libby probably fell as she was trying to walk. That is absolutely possible. There we go. Bring that up while I cover some more of this. But yes, that is possible that she reached out to grab to steady herself for several different reasons. Oh, Cryptex says he used to work in a field where it had to be fully gowned in Tyvek. Hannah says lots of men would like to be married to a bunny. Mr. and Mrs. Steve take that concept to a new level. Oh, maybe they are happy. Absolutely. There's a theory of, I think Abby was forced to keep her hands inside the sweatshirt. He cut Libby. Abby passed out. He then cut Abby, turned her head. He went back to Libby and cut her more times. Abby's hands stayed clean. Yes, she could have passed out from several different reasons or been restrained. Don't really know. And this is true, Stephanie, in the controlled environment. When a crime is committed outside, the elements affect evidence. But when it is inside, evidence is more preserved. It can be, but like everything, how humid is that inside? What type of animals are in certain areas? And there can be certain protective from animal movements and things. And I hate that those tree limbs were left. It just, another thing that drives you crazy. Truth Exposed says, I don't believe he got much, if any, on him. If certain injuries occurred, especially any arterial type of injuries, whereas you would have that spray, there's a good possibility, because FBI noted that due to the amount that blood was noted there and touching, and if he drugged Libby, and how did he drag her? And from those images, there is a substantial amount that there's no way of really able to move her, that you're not in contact with some type of bloody surface. So the FBI noted in the probable cause affidavit, I think with the Ron Logan, that they anticipated that he would become stained. The crime scene pictures are in Delphi. The testing area that I did was in Georgia. Similar tree patterns, but that's about it. Kamala says, only my husband see me in my bunny suit. Mrs. Steve is the best. Absolutely. She's a trooper, ain't no doubt. Yeah. Let me move this to the later part of it, and you'll be able of this video, let it play through as I go back through. I did the same. No, all the reenactments are in the state of Georgia. They're not in Indiana, but I have visited Indiana, Delphi numerous times. I've been to the crime scene several times and noted and documented what type of leaf pattern, debris, and there's very similar qualities as far as the leaf surface, thickness of the leaves that are noted in both of those. Mr. Steve, you better not have kicked her. No. Mrs. Steve has firearms. Steve, any idea about the lack of DNA from the perpetrator? It has concerned me. It almost leads me to the belief that we are dealing with someone that, while he's organized, any offender that brings a weapon to be able to commit a crime is on the organized side. Now, do they also bring restraints? More organized. Do they bring, whereas they limit DNA transfers, are they wearing certain things such as surgical gloves or latex gloves that would limit the shedding or the contact of their DNA with a victim? More organized. For you to be able to do all that, then of course you know exactly why you're going down to that trail and what's going to happen that day. Is that possible? Absolutely. And of course, everything that, as far as latex gloves, surgical gloves, that's pharmacy stuff. And it's easy to jump, say, well, he had all the access in the world, not only to maybe box cutters, but to latex gloves. Yes, that's possible. Did he have the knowledge and the luck of the day that he was able to limit all that unknown DNA that we see that is in discussions now about the DNA expert testifying for all those hours and coming back with that two key points. Richard Allen's DNA is not there, and there's a lot of unknown male DNA and even female DNA that is unknown. Is it enough for a profile? No, but it's unknown. Now, will technologies at some point get to the point that they will be able to identify it? I believe so. Cryptex also, I know it's very sensitive. I heard something about the semen traces. What is your take about that? Absolutely. Is it something that could have occurred? Yes. And, that's something that we have to consider. Yeah, it was some it was fluids, but not of the semen. If you were a crime scene investigator on this case, what would you do differently? Um, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking, it's easy for us all to look at it and with our CSI education and just butcher them. But I think my strategy would have been that by the time we've left there, that forced floor wouldn't look like a forced floor. I think that we would have, especially after finding that unspent round, and then of course the metal detecting and things of that nature that bring to the table, collecting of the branches of as much, how many swabs can we collect, how many areas are to be noted, how much, how many nighttime hours, what chemicals are we going to bring in to have a full understanding of lighting up that once we have the victims out of there, but before we rake that forest floor and we try to truly understand every bit of the movement that occurred at that crime scene and the applications of luminol or otherwise of trying to track all the movements that occurred, because there's stories to be told in it. Now, did they do that? I don't know. Have I heard testimony about that yet? No. Because there's a lot of questions that you get one chance at impressing that jury that, yes, we were there. We were there for a long time. We were there to the point of exhaustion, and we brought in others. And, I'm all about that. Yes, the unknown. There's so much unknown male DNA. It makes you wonder. Would the defense make hay with it? Absolutely. And this is the confusion. True crime. How could the Bloody F tree possibly handprint be Libby's if she was restrained? For her, if you're like this, and you can still be restrained and have certain hand movements. If you're restrained up front, if she's behind her back, of course, you're not going to get 4 feet up that tree to make that type of transfer. So they can still be some type of limited restraints of 2 hands on handcuffs. I have moved and motivated many inmate to move by their restraints of handcuffs, even zip ties, and of how you grab them and what you can do with them and to move them. And so you could have that restraints of and did she break free, or did she break from those bindings if they were soft bindings and get her hand free? There's several different ways. And at what point was she injured? And was this some fantasy? For the fact that we don't know the full story of what's going on here. Was there certain injuries, and is it a cat and mouse type of fantasy for this offender? We don't know what went on that day at that crime scene. Was there a certain aspects of certain things occurring, and the victims, that they had sustained absolutely non-survivable injuries, and did that offender release them to just watch them? There's what these offenders do and how they react, and some things that can occur is mind-boggling, and is not for those of faint of heart to even try to contemplate what goes on in these minds of these individuals. See-through. And this is going to be a key point See-through is making right here. I believe that Rick is guilty based on his timeline. He says 12 to 1:30, yet 5 people saw him until 1:30 p.m. and he was heading a certain direction. And then they see him even after that. But I do not feel the state's making a strong case so far. And that's going to be the thing. If that's him on platform 1, and that's where he was seen, and the timeline says that's him, and the witness identifies, and that, you know, that we see that guy on platform 1, and Richard Allen doesn't see him, and Richard Allen doesn't see the girls, where did he go? He went out there. Richard Allen says that he was on that bridge. He was looking at fish. And if that's him at that certain key point, and somebody's lying. James Tate, how much does it pay to be your victim? Hope Mrs. Steve gets paid. She gets ice cream. She got mint chocolate chip. Could it be because of the dampness of the leaves? If you watch the video, even as I am that this is a very dry day, windy day, and even as I flew the drone over it, it moved the leaves. That there really wasn't a clear path of the leaves being moved. Yeah, I have very understanding neighbors. Now, the ones I'm down here in Georgia, I'm introducing to my mannequins and some of my other stuff that I mess around with. Yes, just another good point from Mark. The timeline of his confessions will be key. Think about all the things we've learned about this crime during the trial and compare it with the many theories we've heard before. Yes. Steve, buy Mrs. Steve a coffee, not from Waffle House. Thank you. Appreciate that. She likes coffee. We drink a lot of coffee. And Barbara says that nothing has changed my mind yet. He's guilty in my eyes. Fair enough. The lack of Richard Allen's phones bothered me a lot. Yes, if they can document that the one phone is missing, that is during that key point, then yes, that will be something for them to consider. Mustang 65, $10 super sticker. Thank you. Appreciate that, your support. Yeah, that is a horrible thought, but it is extremely possible. Drag marks should generate blood marks on the floor as well. Yes, across the leaves and that. And like I said, I don't know what the processing was done that night. I think they noted that they left like at 11 o'clock at night. How long they were on the scene, what chemicals were there to enhance, what lighting was used, and did they, were they able to, in that time frame, process everything and locate all the blood trails? It's possible. I just don't know. And Matt Dillon. Yes. Yeah, the failure to collect that for several weeks absolutely is something that I think is that will haunt them. It gives the defense a lot of room to argue some key points, and they will argue those points. Anna says, justice for Doug Till and justice for Timmy Dees. Thank you. Paula said, I asked a question. I hope I got it. I don't know if I did or not. I hope I got your question, Paul. If not, throw it back in there. Steve, you forgot to make her wear bunny ears. Oh my goodness. Hello, Gail. Oh, yes. Yeah. There's a lot of things, like I said, showing the effort and, have they? Mistakes were made. The investigators admitted to that. And do things like that occur? Absolutely. Was all the crime scenes I ever worked absolutely pristine? And did I ever make a mistake? Sure, I made mistakes. Josh, will you do a segment show at some point about interrogation techniques? Sure, I will. And have I ever got a false confession? Court said I did one time. Do I think it was false? I think they were involved, but the court ruled it was a false confession. Steve, I hope you brought her a nice dinner and flowers afterwards. Mint chocolate chip, and we discuss what went on. Hello, Al on the prowl. Good to see you. Al on the prowl has a great show late at night. You just have to jump in there, though. He's liable to be on at any moment. Yes, and this is a key point, that the difference between Kohlberger and Richard Allen is that Kohlberger is a graduate of a criminal science, and whereas we don't know what, if any, research was done by Richard Allen, although I'm sure they have, will be checking all his online searches. Hello, Karen. She, if y'all don't know who Karen is, she is the mother of Doug Tip, and has been fighting for justice for him up in the Missouri. And absolutely look up that Doug Till. Mud could possibly, from exiting the crime scene, possibly fell. I've been there several times, and once you're on that side of the creek, and you're going up, there's no other areas that really, that I could see. And I don't, there's little old ravines coming down through there, but I've been in those ravines and pretty, recent times of rain, and I felt, I think I've been there, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, and I fell at least twice, both of those times at night. And while I did have some transfer of dirt stains, it wasn't heavy mud or anything. I had heard that Keegan Klein was on the list to testify, and I think it's for the defense. Yes, I think this is the theory that law enforcement's getting at. If Libby was not fatally injured in the first attack, although she could have been fatally injured, just hadn't bled out to the point of losing consciousness or enough blood pressure or loss of blood to succumb. But once she sat down and was in that position, was she attacked again? It's possible. We just, like I said, I wish that we had a better understanding of everything that was processed and how it was processed. Yes, Mark, you're absolutely correct. We know, other than what CSI and some of the movements by Cicero as far as location 1, 2, and 3. That's all we have. Kamala says, looking for fish. Do you see how high that bridge was? Did you have binoculars? I've looked for, the water at certain heights and depth. It's extremely clear in the summertime. In spring and being at the height it was by measuring on the searchers that were in the water, being, I think, somewhere, it looks like they're just over hip high. And how stained was it on that day? Could you have seen fish? Don't know. Hello, farmer. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. I probably would have. And my understanding of that they left the F tree or the upside down L tree there. That would probably not have been the case. I still have the tree that I did on this testing. It's still in my basement in Georgia, and I'm going to sometime in the next year test it to see how the blood pattern or how well it upheld being stored over the years in a controlled environment. I can't wait for the confession. There has to be something. Yes. And plus there could be other evidence that we're unaware of. We just haven't seen it. True Crime Web, did they use alternate light sources? I would imagine they absolutely did. But are there any reports showing their use and what their plan of action was and what they were searching for and that they didn't find, for the fact that you try to bring all those tests and all those types of analysis to the table to answer the questions for the jurors so that you look as professional and as expert handling of the scene as possible, because confidence in your CSIs carry a lot of weight with a jury. Rumor is Rick traded his 2017 phone in, but he says in his interview he would try and find it. Yeah, two different possibilities. And that's a good point. I think Richard Allen photographed and videoed them as they undressed. That was his souvenir, and it's why one phone has vanished. Very possible. Junior says that he saw fish on the bridge very easily. I went up there. I didn't see the fish, but Junior probably has better eyes than I do. Closer to the end of trial, and I think he's guilty. I would think he has done this before. Need my blue light special, please. There you go. Thank you, Kamala. I do think the FOA jacket account of Allen stands for fully automatic jacket, like full metal jacket. Interesting. Anna says that talking to see-through, he said a couple of times his wife may have recycled the phones as per Tom Webster's coverage from today. Possible. Out on the brow. Shoney's and fake flowers. I buy her fake flowers one time, and she still has them. Yeah, I need coffee, and Mrs. Steve needs a mint chocolate chip ice cream factory. And I would tend to agree. There is a lot of circumstantial evidence, um, and we just have. Hopefully, there'll be some direct. We just don't know yet. Both of them have a mixture. Did they state who passed first mix of blood from victim to victim? And that's something key that you need that would answer some of this. Um, but now that doesn't mean, and what can be confusing is that were certain acts made, and did he, if it was a lone wolf or ever how many offenders, did they go from one victim back to the other multiple times? And how can you identify that first contact? That would be difficult. Is it possible? Yes, but it would be difficult. The more times that the offender went back and forth between the victims could confuse it. But now, when we look at something like Koberger and the case in Idaho of multiple floors and multiple victims, and a limited time spent with each victim and them leaving the house, it's far easier to do that. But if you have where someone can be somewhere for quite a while and has the opportunity to go back and forth between two, it can be very difficult. Come on, magic mushrooms wasn't on my bingo card. Have they checked the VIN number on Alan's car if that's the original Ford Focus or if he purchased new car seat? I have no idea, but you would expect that they would have tried to check as much about that vehicle as possible and look at those. Are those seats? Have they been changed out? Are they at manufacturer's suggested torque? Because all those vehicles are torqued down to certain things. Have they checked those boat patterns? Don't know. Farmer says, is it possible to determine between a hard button push versus an update or code wet cycling the phone? I don't know. It's above my pay grade. But I know that some of the phone expert testimony was limited and has been limited. I just don't know. I'll have to go back and look at that. Well, no, that's not the one I wanted. Yes, there can be all different types of covers. He could, from seat covers, floor mats, floor covers, to that he could have. But to use those, you have to be a little bit more organized. Yeah, the more preparation for the cover up is the higher amount of organization it would take for an individual to. True Crime Web. Josh the Posh needs the blue light also. Okay. I'm liable to miss people, and I hate that I have. Mark says that the expert stated Libby was first. Possible, like I said, where I recovered my information, like I said, you may have the someone that, or it may be on the news, and I just hadn't seen that one yet. Where was the second unknown DNA found? And it's only partial. I don't think there's any of it now, other than the lab text DNA who contaminated a couple of things, or was it the same lab tech? Don't know. But of all the identification so far, the lab tech is the only one as far as unknown males that's been identified. Now, in the state of Georgia, with the GBI, I know that whenever we submitted stuff that and GBI agents may have worked our scenes. At that time, back in those years, everybody that was a GBI agent or worked in the labs had their DNA profiles on in-house. Yeah, Junior, there's some holes in their investigation, sadly. Tort was not on your bingo either. No. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can check about vehicles and crime scenes. Yes, Anna. And this is a key point. Lots of stuff can be replaced in a vehicle, but I've read about minuscule amount of blood and DNA ending up in tiny cracks and crevices. That's our wheelhouse, guys. That's that there's only so much of a vehicle you can easily assess. And when you're introducing chemicals or water and you're trying to scrub out certain stains, that you'll move that stain or you'll move critical parts, even DNA rich fluids up into certain areas that you can't finish cleaning. And even seat belts or headrests underneath them, or those rods going down, that there's a lot of places that you can transfers DNA, mirrors, radio buttons, all that stuff. That if you try to clean it during the cleaning process, you can push stuff. More often than not in houses, but it would apply to any type of surface about pushing that DNA into an area. All of us have tried to clean up something at one point or another and have swiped across the surface and pushed certain debris in areas that we can't get back to get it out. And then we get frustrated with that. All right. On the prowl. Steve, do you think it's weird they didn't check the female DNA? It drives me crazy they didn't, for the fact that Lacard's exchange principle addresses this very issue, that you're not only looking for the offender's DNA or co-offender's DNA, you're looking for DNA or you're looking for evidence, fibers, hair from the offender's home environment that would be on his clothing, in his vehicle, in his house, in the washing machine that gets transferred, or the dryer that gets transferred from one item to another that offender takes and puts on, and then goes to a crime scene and sheds that DNA, that hair, that fiber. And it's not always that it has to be as far as the first generation that's to the offender himself. It can be to any part of his environment. I don't care if it's his mechanic that worked on the Ford Focus and changed the oil 2 weeks ago, that DNA is transferred to the crime scene. I don't care. I just want that link of, okay, how did your DNA get to the crime scene? And what vehicles have you worked on that possibly could have been at that crime scene? Things of that. Or do you recognize, looking at this video, any of these vehicles that you worked on? And I know that's just speculation and putting it out there, but we have to find what links, and using Lacard's exchange principle, how we can use that to identify that offender. It's not easy, but it can be done. I think your demolition of the house, because the jury, have they demolition of Richard Allen's house, or are you talking about Kohlberg? Thank you, Sensei. Justice for Abby and Libby again. Thank you. Yeah, about living with males and there being that DNA. I find it strange that on the fingernail scrapings they're saying there's unidentified male DNA on both, and that's exactly correct. You never know. You test it; could be offender's girlfriend or daughter. Absolutely. Yes, Kamal, you're absolutely correct. The defense is going to make points for how the evidence was collected or not collected. I think they should have gotten assistance from bigger towns or cities who had more experience with processing a scene like that. My understanding is this is Indiana State Police. They talk about ISP crime scene techs. You can't get much higher as far as state level. If we brought in the GBI, that's which we very rarely had to bring in GBIs except for demolition of certain type of discoveries as far as explosives and things. But as far as processing crime scenes, did they have other technologies as multi-lights and alternate light sources? Yes, if we needed that. But I think they had the most highly trained individuals in the state there. Well, I read a testimony. It said ISP CSI techs. Yes, in the Pink Panther movies, Caruso says, I suspect everyone and I suspect no one. And honestly, that's how you solve crimes, by following evidence. Yes. I forgot about the Pink Panther. Barbara, got to be better than Troop E in Missouri, just saying. The defense will detail the FBI's issue with the ISP CSI work. Should be interesting. I'm sure the defense is going to make great or take great measures to when they bring in their whoever CSI guy, that it will not be so complimentary to how ISP did this. But anyway, guys, I appreciate everybody being here. Y'all take care. We got some more testing to do as far as the cuts, and I will get back with y'all on that. But we appreciate all of y'all being here. And let me get this back up to there. And we'll see you guys soon. Stay safe. Bye-bye.